George Orwell, the man who warned the future. There are some thinkers who observe the world, and then there are those who walk into its darkest corners and come back with uncomfortable truths. George Orwell was the second kind. He didn't write about power, oppression, and truth from a safe distance. Again and again, he placed himself inside systems that revealed them. This is not just the story of a writer. This is the story of a man who kept choosing truth, even when it made him an outsider everywhere he went. It begins in 1903, not in England, but in British-ruled India. Born as Eric Arthur Blair in Motihari, he entered the world inside the machinery of empire. His father served in the colonial administration, and from the beginning, Orwell was positioned within a system that assumed its own superiority. He was later educated in England, eventually attending Eton, one of the most elite schools in the country. But even there, something didn't sit right. He was close enough to privilege to understand it and distant enough to question it. That tension between belonging and rejection would follow him for life. Then came the first decisive turning point. In 1922, Orwell joined the Indian Imperial Police in Burma. This wasn't theory anymore, this was power in action. He was no longer observing empire, he was enforcing it. And he came to despise it. Years later, in his essay, Shooting an Elephant, he would describe a moment that crystallized everything. Standing before a crowd, pressured to kill an elephant, not because it was necessary, but because authority demanded the performance of control. In that moment, he realized something deeply unsettling. The oppressor is not free. He is trapped by the expectations of power, forced to act against his own judgment just to maintain authority. Soon after, Orwell resigned in 1927. He didn't just leave a job, he turned his back on empire. But Orwell didn't retreat into comfort. Instead, he moved toward hardship. In Paris and London, he lived among the poor, working as a dishwasher, sleeping in shelters, and experiencing hunger and instability firsthand. This was not romanticism, and not simple necessity. It was, in part, a deliberate attempt to understand reality without the filter of class. From this came Down and Out in Paris and London. More importantly, it shaped a principle that would define his life. If you want to understand the world, you cannot rely on abstraction alone. You have to encounter it directly. Then came one of the most dangerous chapters of his life, the Spanish Civil War. In the 1930s, Orwell traveled to Spain to fight against fascism. At first, it appeared to be a clear moral struggle, but reality proved more complicated. Fighting with the anti-Stalinist POUM militia, Orwell was shot through the throat by a sniper, an injury he barely survived. Yet what shocked him even more was what happened behind the front lines. Communist-aligned factions within the Republican side, under strong Soviet influence, began suppressing groups like his own, arresting, silencing, and eliminating perceived rivals. Orwell found himself hunted, not by fascists, but by supposed allies. This experience changed him permanently. He came to understand that totalitarianism is not confined to one ideology. It can emerge anywhere power begins to override truth. During World War II, Orwell returned to England and worked for the BBC from 1941 to 1943, producing broadcasts intended to support the Allied war effort, particularly for audiences in India. It was meaningful work, but it also exposed him to something troubling. Even in a just cause, information was being shaped, filtered, and strategically presented. The line between truth and propaganda was not always clear. Orwell began to see that the manipulation of information is not exclusive to dictatorships. It is a constant temptation within all systems of power. In 1945, he published Animal Farm. On the surface, it is a simple fable about animals overthrowing their human owner. But beneath that simplicity lies a devastating critique of how revolutions can betray their own ideals. Some animals are more equal than others. With that line, Orwell captured a brutal reality. Power does not just corrupt, it rewrites the rules to justify itself. The book was initially rejected by several publishers, partly because criticizing the Soviet Union during wartime was politically inconvenient. But once published, it became a global success. Orwell had exposed something many preferred not to see, and yet his most important work was still ahead. By the late 1940s, Orwell was severely ill with tuberculosis. He retreated to the remote island of Jura, off the coast of Scotland, isolated, physically weakened, but intellectually relentless. There, he wrote, 1984. This was not just a novel. It was a warning. In it, Orwell introduced ideas that would enter everyday language. Big brother, thought crime, doublethink. But at its core was a deeper insight. Control of language is control of thought. If you shape the words people use, you shape the limits of what they can think. If you control the past, you influence the future. This was not speculation. It was the synthesis of everything Orwell had lived through. Empire, class, poverty, war, ideological betrayal, and propaganda. He completed the book as his health deteriorated. In January 1950, shortly after its publication, George Orwell died at the age of 46. So what exactly is Orwell's contribution? It goes far beyond literature. First, he exposed the mechanics of power, not only in obvious tyrannies, but in ordinary institutions. He showed that oppression does not always appear as force. Sometimes it speaks in the language of justice, security, or necessity. Second, he revealed the fragility of truth. Truth is not simply discovered. It is contested, pressured, and vulnerable to distortion. Maintaining it requires constant effort. Third, and perhaps most enduringly, he showed the power of language. Language is not neutral. It can clarify reality or obscure it. It can expand thought or restrict it. For Orwell, clear language was not just a stylistic choice, it was a moral responsibility. Because when language becomes vague or manipulated, thought itself begins to erode. There is a pattern in Orwell's life that is difficult to ignore. He enters a system, engages with it seriously, experiences its contradictions, and then leaves and tells the truth about it. Empire, class, revolution, media, he challenged them all. And that is what makes his story so powerful and so unsettling. Because Orwell is not only describing distant regimes or historical events, he is holding up a mirror. And the question he leaves us with is not whether his world could happen. It is whether parts of it already have. George Orwell did not just warn us about the future, he taught us how to see the present. And once you see it, it becomes very hard to look away.